John Turner had spent his entire life on the land. His boots had worn into the soil of his farm, his hands calloused from years of toil, and his muscles ached with the rhythm of every season. But today the earth felt more hostile than it ever had. The wind was a cutting blade, tearing through the barren snowfields and slashing at his face like an icy whip. He didn't remember it ever being this cold, this relentless. The crate behind him groaned as he dragged it over the frozen crust. Fuel for the barn's brazier. Nothing more, nothing less. But it felt heavier than it should, like the storm itself was leaning on him, pushing him further into the brutal wilderness. Just get to the barn, John told himself. The storm had swallowed it whole just 20 feet ahead. He couldn't see it, but he knew it was there. He had built it with his father's hands and his own blood. There was no mistaking it. His breath came out in puffs of white, the air thinning, the cold numbing his hands. One step, then another. His boots punched through the snow with a deep thud, dragging the crate behind him. It was a slow, painful crawl, and he fought against the wind, each step harder than the last. Just a few more feet, he thought, but the wind howled, stealing his thoughts as the darkness closed in. Then the rope snapped. Shit. The crate pitched sideways, a splintered edge of wood scraping against the ice. It hit something buried in the snow, a rock, a boulder, John couldn't tell. The fuel rushed out, spreading across the snow in a slick, dark wave. His eyes darted down, panic rising in his throat. It hissed as it met the cold. The smell of chemicals burned his nostrils. John lunged for the crate, slipping in the process. His knee slammed into the frozen earth, the pain sharp and sudden. The cold was instant, sinking into his jeans and biting through to the bone. Damn it, he cursed under his breath. His hand fumbled for the crate's edge, but the wind drowned out everything else. His heart hammered in his chest as he tried to right the crate, but that's when he heard it. A groan, low, weak. John froze, his hand still on the broken crate, his breath shallow and quick. That wasn't the wind, or an animal. The sound was too human, a grunt, then a second groan, even quieter, like it was trying to call out without strength. His eyes scanned the landscape, but the blizzard obscured everything beyond a few feet. He couldn't see the source of the sound, but instinct kicked in. He had to act. Stay calm, focus. John's free hand hovered over the knife on his belt. He didn't draw it, just held it there, ready. He took a step, then another, moving slowly toward the sound. The snow crunched beneath his boots, each step more careful than the last. There, a shape just 10 feet to his left slumped against a fence post. Half buried in the snow, but still there. Too big, too heavy, not an animal. John's heart skipped a beat. He drew the knife, his grip tight and steady. A form armored, blackened, and cracked in places, its body smoking faintly like a burnt log. The stench of metal and something else, chemical, sharp, almost metallic, hit him hard. His stomach churned. The figure shifted. One arm hung limp, useless. The other reached out toward the sky, fingers curled like it was still holding onto something that wasn't there. The alien. It was an alien. John had seen the broadcasts. Everyone had. The ships that had fallen from the sky 2 months ago scattered across 3 states. The government said not to approach, don't engage, don't help, just wait for them to die. It's dying, John thought, just like they said. He should walk away, let it die. But as he watched, he saw the alien's eyes. Pale, too wide, not human, blue skin, raw and blistered. The armor fused to its chest in places. The groaning continued, the alien's breath shallow, labored. John's mind raced. He'd seen cattle die like this, his brother even, seen that look, the look of something already lost. Still, he couldn't just leave it out here to freeze, not like this. John cursed under his breath, shaking his head as he stepped forward. He grabbed the alien under the shoulders, the cold skin like iron against his hands. The weight was more than he expected. He tried to lift it, but the alien's body was stiff, dead weight. His boots slid in the snow as he pulled, dragged, fighting against the storm and the bitter cold that bit through his coat. It felt like hours, but he finally made it to the barn, collapsing against the wooden walls as he half-dragged, half-carried the alien inside. The wind died down, and inside the barn it was dark. The brazier in the corner flickered, but its warmth did little to combat the cold creeping in from every crack. John set the alien down beside the fire, chest heaving from the effort. His hands shook, his knees burned with cold and exhaustion. He crouched beside the alien, listening for breath. The hissing was still there, faint but alive. John stared at the alien's face, sharp features, burned scars crisscrossing one cheek. The eyes remained closed, but the alien was still breathing, still alive. The warmth from the brazier flickered over the alien's exposed chest, and John noticed the crackling of the fire. He could see the faint glow of the alien's armor in the dim light, patches of blue where the burns hadn't taken their toll. John's coat came off and he draped it over the alien's chest. It wasn't enough. It wouldn't be enough. The alien's hand hung limply by its side, fingers twitching slightly as if searching for something. "You picked a hell of a place to crash," John muttered, though he wasn't sure the alien could hear him. No response. The alien's lips barely moved, but John could see the slow rise and fall of its chest. It wasn't dead, not yet. John stood, packing the small space. He had a decision to make, and he couldn't avoid it. He could walk away just like everyone else said he should, or he could take a risk. But if he helped this creature, this invader, he knew that nothing would ever be the same, for him, for the village, for everyone. He reached into his jacket and pulled out the last of the bread he had wrapped that morning. His wife had scolded him for not saving it for the family, but now it was all he had. He broke it in half and looked at it for a long moment, then set one half on the coat near the alien's hand. His conscience wouldn't let him sleep otherwise. "If I don't warm you, I won't be able to sleep." The alien's eyes fluttered open. Pale irises locked onto John's face, and for a moment John felt the weight of the stare. It was too still, too intense. Then slowly the alien's hand reached out. The motion was weak, slow, but deliberate. John didn't pull away. The alien's fingers trembled as they brushed against his hand, the heat from the brazier still biting at both their skins. The alien's lips moved, though the words were strange, unintelligible. But the tone, John could hear that. It wasn't a command or a threat, it was gratitude. John nodded once sharply. "Just don't die in my barn." He didn't know why he was helping, why he couldn't just let it go. But in that moment, the alien wasn't an invader. It was a creature in need, and John Turner had been raised to help those in need, whether it was human or alien. The alien's eyes closed again, and John sat back on his heels, watching as the creature lay still by the fire. His hands still shook, his heart still thudded in his chest. But he couldn't go back now. He had crossed a line. And now there was no going back. The quiet of the barn was almost eerie. The crackling fire and the sound of wind outside were the only things that filled the heavy silence. John Turner sat on the ground, his knees aching, his hands still shaking from the effort it had taken to drag the alien into the barn. The wind had died down, but the cold still seeped through the cracks in the barn's wooden walls. John kept his gaze on the alien, lying still on the floor, the faint rise and fall of its chest the only sign of life. Its pale blue skin shimmered in the dim firelight, burnt and blistered in places. The stench of scorched metal and singed flesh was overpowering, but despite the alien's condition, there was something human about it. Maybe not in appearance, but in the way it breathed, in the way it struggled to survive. John had always been taught to help others when they needed it, no matter who or what they were. But this was different. This was a decision that could ruin his life. The alien groaned again, stirring. John moved closer, careful not to startle it. The alien's eyes flickered open slowly, its pale irises locking onto John's face. The moment stretched out, both of them just staring at each other. The alien's lips moved, though the words were unintelligible to John. It was speaking in a language John couldn't understand, but the tone? It wasn't a demand, it wasn't threatening. It was soft, pleading. John swallowed, unsure of what to do. He was out of his depth. But then he did what he knew best. He reached out, offering the bread. A simple gesture, but in a way it was all he had to offer. His wife would never forgive him if she knew what he was doing, but in that moment he couldn't stop himself. He set the bread down on the coat beside the alien's hand, careful not to touch it. The alien's trembling fingers twitched toward the food, but it didn't take it immediately. Instead, it stared at the bread, then back at John, as if understanding the weight of the decision. John shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to read the alien's gaze. But when it finally reached out, slowly, delicately, and picked up the bread, John felt something stir inside him. It wasn't fear, it was something else. Sympathy, maybe even understanding. The alien's hand shook as it brought the bread to its lips, tearing a small piece off and eating it slowly, like it wasn't sure if it could trust the food. The blue flames from the brazier flickered, casting shadows on the walls, but the silence between them was thick. John waited, watching the alien. He had no idea what to say, what to do. He had taken a risk by bringing this creature into his barn. He didn't know if it would turn on him the moment it regained its strength, or if he would be paying for this decision sooner rather than later. But when the alien finished the bread, it looked up at John again. Its pale blue eyes seemed softer now. It wasn't just a creature lying in his barn anymore. It had become something else. A being who had been wounded, who had survived an impossible journey, who had come here for reasons John still didn't understand. Then the alien spoke again, its voice hoarse but clear. Not in English, but John could understand the tone. "Thank you," it whispered, the words broken and sharp, as though it had never said them before. John froze. The words hit him harder than anything else the alien had said or done. The creature, no, the warrior, had thanked him. He had seen the broadcasts. He knew what the government said about these creatures. They were invaders. They had come to destroy, to conquer. But here was this alien, broken and battered in his barn, and it had thanked him. John leaned back against the wall, staring at the alien. He didn't know what he had expected when he took it in, but it wasn't this. "You're welcome," John said, his voice quieter than he meant it to be. He glanced at the fire and let out a slow breath, trying to steady himself. His heart was pounding in his chest, but there was something else too, something he couldn't ignore: compassion. The alien's eyes closed again, and for a moment John thought it had fallen back to sleep. But then, in a slow movement, the alien extended its hand. One burned and blistered, trembling but reaching out. John hesitated for a moment before he reached out as well, his hand brushing against the alien. The touch sent a shock through him. It wasn't just a cold, metallic sensation. There was heat, warmth in that touch. The alien's body felt different under his hand, alive in a way that John couldn't describe. The alien's eyes opened again, this time more focused. Its hand tightened around John's for a brief second. A silent understanding passed between them. John didn't know what it meant, but he knew that he couldn't let this alien die. Not here, not now, not after everything that had happened. Before John could say anything more, there was a sudden crash outside the barn. A loud thud, followed by the sound of heavy boots crunching through the snow. His heart skipped a beat. John's eyes shot toward the door, and the alien's hand tightened around his. The warrior's eyes flickered toward the noise outside, its head tilting slightly as if it were listening. John stood quickly, his mind racing. Was it the government? Had they come already? He couldn't risk it. The village was on edge. There was no telling what the government would do if they found out about the alien in his barn. He stood, pulling the knife from his belt just in case. He wasn't going to let anyone take this creature, not without a fight. The noise outside grew louder, and John could hear voices now. Too many. The storm had cleared enough for someone to be out there. The crunch of snow under boots was unmistakable. The alien, still seated by the brazier, slowly moved to stand. Its hand twitched, as if to reach for a weapon that wasn't there, but then it stopped. It was weak, still struggling to move, but it had a presence. An air about it that said it wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. John's mind raced, his heart thudding in his chest. He had no idea what to do next. He had made the choice to help, to save the alien, but now it was no longer just about him. The village would come for him. The government would come for them both. But as the noise outside grew louder, John knew one thing for certain. He wasn't backing down, not now, not ever. John's heart pounded in his chest as the heavy boots outside continued to crunch through the snow. The door to the barn creaked again, the wind howling against the wooden frame. The shadows of figures shifted just beyond the threshold. They were close, too close. John held his breath, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He had saved the alien, an enemy by all rights, and now that very decision was about to bring the full force of the government down on him. The rumors were already spreading through the village, about the strange lights in the sky, the ships that had fallen, the orders to shoot on sight. Everyone knew the dangers of helping these invaders. But John's resolve was unshaken. The alien wasn't a threat, not anymore. If he had any hope of making it through this, he would have to stand his ground. The alien needed him now more than ever. John glanced over at the alien, who had struggled to its feet, its burned hand reaching out to steady itself on the barn wall. Its eyes, once dull and unfocused, were now sharp and alert. The warrior had regained some strength, but not enough to fight back if they were discovered. John stepped closer to the fire, his eyes fixed on the door, listening to every creak and snap in the wind outside. The alien's gaze flicked to him, a brief, silent exchange passing between them. There was no fear in those pale blue eyes, only the quiet, grim determination of someone who knew their fate was intertwined with another's. Another knock, a thud. John's hand clenched around the handle of his knife, the cold steel comforting in his grip, even though he knew it was useless. He wasn't about to let them take the alien, but he wasn't sure how long he could keep up this fight. The entire village had turned against him already. They would never forgive him for helping an enemy. The alien's voice broke the silence, low and guttural, a language that still made John's skin prickle. But the tone was familiar, calm, measured. "They are coming." John swallowed hard, his thoughts swirling. The sound of boots outside had grown louder. A voice, muffled by the thick walls, called out, "Turner, we know you're in there, open up." It was the marshal's voice. John's chest tightened. The alien stepped forward, unsteady but determined, as if it knew what was coming. Its armor creaked as it shifted, but the warrior didn't falter. John moved toward the door, standing between the alien and the entrance, his hands trembling but his stance resolute. "They're not here for us," John muttered to himself, more to reassure himself than anything else. He took a breath, steadying his nerves. Another voice came from outside, louder now. "Turner, this is your last chance. Open the door or we'll break it down." John's eyes met the alien's, the weight of the situation settling in. The creature's gaze softened, a slight nod of recognition passing between them. The alien had been trying to say something important, but John couldn't quite understand it. Suddenly, there was a pounding sound, followed by a series of heavy knocks on the door. It rattled against its frame, and John knew they weren't about to wait any longer. "If they come in," the alien's voice was clear now, though it was still rough from its injuries, "I will protect you." John's heart skipped. The alien wasn't even sure of his own survival, but it was willing to die for him. "I don't want your protection," John said quickly, his eyes darting to the door. "We don't need to fight." But the alien's eyes were unwavering, its hand resting on the damaged weapon at its side. John's eyes flicked to the blue flames flickering in the brazier, a fleeting thought running through his mind. Was this what the fire meant? Was this what they had shared in that small, fleeting moment? A bond. The banging on the door grew more forceful, and John's resolve hardened. He turned, quickly grabbing a blanket from the corner of the barn and draped it over the alien's body. His heart pounded in his chest as he stepped toward the door, knife still in hand. He wouldn't let them take this creature, not without a fight. John turned the handle slowly, the door creaking as it cracked open. A cold gust of wind rushed inside, but he could see nothing in the storm beyond. His eyes locked with the marshal, standing just outside. The marshal's rifle was slung over his shoulder, but his eyes were narrowed with suspicion. "John," the marshal called, his voice thick with authority. "Step aside, we're here to take the alien." John's voice caught in his throat, but he managed to speak. "No." The marshal's eyes flickered with surprise, then hardened. "You don't get to make the rules here, Turner. Open the door, now." John tightened his grip on the knife, but his eyes didn't leave the marshal's. "I said no." Behind him, the alien shifted, the blanket sliding slightly from its body as it took a step forward, the air around it crackling with tension. John's heart raced. He could feel the alien's presence, the promise of something unknown, something both dangerous and familiar. The marshal's eyes flicked past John, seeing the alien standing just inside the barn. His jaw tightened, and for a moment John thought the marshal would draw his weapon. But instead, the marshal's face darkened. "You're making a mistake, Turner," he said, his voice thick with frustration. "You don't know what you're dealing with." John's voice was firm, unwavering. "I know exactly what I'm dealing with, and I won't let you take it." The marshal didn't respond at first, his gaze flicking between John and the alien behind him. The silence stretched on, the only sound the howl of the wind outside. Then finally the marshal nodded. "You've made your choice." John's heart sank. He knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. "Don't make me regret it," the marshal warned, his voice low and dangerous. He turned on his heel and signaled the others. "We'll be back for you." John slammed the door shut, his breath coming in heavy bursts. The barn fell into a deathly quiet once more, the only sound the crackle of the brazier. John leaned against the door, his heart still pounding, his mind racing. The alien stood silently, watching him with those pale, knowing eyes. "They will return," the alien said softly, its voice tinged with sadness. John turned, his throat tight. "I know." But as he looked at the alien, a strange sense of calm washed over him. This was just the beginning. He had crossed a line, but he wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. The barn door slammed shut behind John, the thick wood rattling from the impact. The echoes of the marshal's warning still reverberated in the air, his words hanging heavy in John's mind. "You've made your choice." John's chest tightened as he turned to face the alien. The warrior stood, tall and unwavering, its deep blue skin still scorched, the edges of its armor fused and cracked. The alien's eyes met John's with an intensity that spoke volumes. It didn't need words to communicate its understanding. It knew the stakes. John wiped his face with his sleeve, trying to steady his racing heart. His breath came in shallow gasps as the gravity of the situation settled over him like a weight he couldn't shake. He had made a choice, one that would change everything. But what did that choice mean now? The alien shifted slightly, the weight of its damaged body making it slow and deliberate in its movements. John noticed the subtle way it favored its burned hand, the tremors still visible in the alien's fingers. Yet, despite the alien's injuries, it stood tall, proud. It had no fear, only resolve. John looked away, his mind spinning. What now? The sound of distant voices reached his ears, louder now. The villagers. They had seen the marshal's men leave, and now John knew they would be coming. His choice wasn't just about the alien anymore. It was about the village, his home, the people he had spent his life with. His wife, Emma, had been in the house when the marshal arrived. Would she stand with him, or would the pressure of the community drive her to side with the authorities? He couldn't bear the thought of losing her, of the distance growing between them because of this alien, this warrior who, despite all their differences, had shown nothing but gratitude. The alien's voice broke through his thoughts, low and steady. "Your people will come, they will want answers." John turned to face it, his hands still clenched into fists. "I know." The alien's eyes were unreadable. "You did not turn me away. That is more than they would ever do." John stepped toward the brazier, the flames casting long shadows across the barn. He reached for the last of the firewood, trying to steady his hands. His mind raced. What if the villagers demanded he turn the alien over? What if they sided with the government? "You don't understand," John muttered, mostly to himself. "This is my home, my family. If they find out, if they turn against me—" His words trailed off, swallowed by the crackling fire. The alien stepped closer, its presence powerful despite its battered body. "Your bond is not just with me, John Turner," it said, its voice clear and deep. "It is with all of us. You will find strength in that bond, even when your world threatens to fall apart." John stared at the alien, uncertain of what that meant. The weight of the creature's words lingered in the air, and John realized, with a sickening sense of dread, that this wasn't just about saving an alien anymore. This was about something deeper, something much larger. He had crossed a line that would not be easily undone. The door to the barn creaked again. John froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his knife. The wind had died down outside, and the sky was now a dull, ashen gray. The villagers were here. They had come sooner than John expected. He heard footsteps, then voices growing louder. "John, we know you're in there. Open up." It was Cole, his neighbor and longtime friend, his voice carrying through the storm's fatting howl. John's stomach tightened. He could feel the eyes of the alien on him, unblinking, waiting. The warrior didn't speak, but John could sense its anticipation, its readiness. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped toward the door, feeling the weight of every decision he had made since he had taken the alien into his barn. The sound of the villagers grew louder, and John could see their shadows through the cracks in the barn. They were waiting for him to make his move, to decide what kind of man he was. Was he the farmer they knew, or was he something else? John opened the door slowly, just wide enough to peer outside. His heart sank as he saw the group of villagers gathered outside, led by Cole. They were armed, pitchforks, axes, anything they could find. Their faces were a mix of fear and suspicion, and John knew they weren't here to talk. John's voice was low, steady. "What do you want?" Cole stepped forward, his face hard and angry. "You've been hiding that thing, haven't you?" He spat on the ground. "We've all heard the rumors, John, about the ships, about the government's orders. What are you thinking? Helping the enemy? You know what they're capable of." John's breath hitched. His mind raced. He had no answers, no quick excuses. He only had his truth, the truth that somehow felt like it was slipping through his fingers. "It's not like that," John said quietly, his voice thick. "I'm not helping them to hurt anyone. I'm helping because—" He hesitated, searching for the words. Because it's the right thing to do. Cole shook his head, his face turning red. The right thing? You're endangering us all. The government's already declared them a threat. You know what they're capable of. Why are you defending them? John took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. This one's not a threat. He's not here to harm us. Another voice broke through the crowd, this one softer, more reluctant. John's right. He saved that thing's life. He didn't have to. It was Emma. John turned, his heart rising at the sound of her voice. She stepped forward, her eyes avoiding the villagers' gaze. She met John's eyes for a fleeting moment, but the unease was still there. We can't just turn our backs on him, she said, though her voice trembled. Not now. The villagers didn't move. They stood, silent for a long moment, as if waiting for something to change, for John to give them the answers they so desperately sought. Then Cole spoke again, his voice hard. You're a traitor, John. You've chosen this thing over us, over the people you grew up with. You don't get to decide our future. You need to send him away, or we'll do it for you. John's blood ran cold. He could see it in their eyes. Some of them were ready to go further. The stakes had never been higher. Behind him, the alien moved forward, its silhouette casting a long shadow in the barn's flickering firelight. Its voice, calm and authoritative, filled the silence between them. We are not your enemies, John Turner, but if you choose to cast us aside, your fire will be extinguished. Your world will burn. The villagers recoiled, uncertain of how to respond to the alien's words. John felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a storm. He wasn't just fighting for his life anymore. He was fighting for the future of his village, his people, his way of life. John turned back to the alien, meeting its unyielding gaze. He knew now that this wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for something far greater, a fight for understanding, a fight for peace, a fight for trust across species, across cultures. And he knew that in the end, this would come down to one choice, to stand or to fall. The air in the barn was thick with tension. John stood at the center, his back to the group of villagers, his gaze locked on the alien warrior who stood with its broad shoulders hunched, as if sensing the storm about to break. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, but inside, the barn felt like the eye of a hurricane, calm on the surface, but chaotic beneath. The villagers were waiting, their eyes flickering between John and the alien. He could hear the soft mutters behind him, half of them unsure, the other half fueled by fear. John's breath hitched as he realized what this was. This wasn't just a village divided over one decision. This was a judgment, a trial that had already begun before anyone even spoke, and it was up to him to decide if it would end in flames. Cole stepped forward again, his eyes blazing with anger. We can't let this go on, John. The alien, this creature, is an enemy. The government says it's a threat. We're supposed to do what's right, not defend a damn invader. John's fists clenched at his sides, but he kept his voice calm, trying not to let the growing frustration break through. You don't understand, Cole. This one isn't like the others. He's not here to kill us. He's not here to hurt anyone. We did not come to harm you. The alien's voice cut through the air, low but firm. Its deep blue eyes never wavered, staring not at John but at the villagers. We came to seek refuge. We are your kin in fire and in blood. You saved one of us, and for that we will honor you. John turned toward the alien, his heart heavy. The words sounded foreign, even when spoken in simple tones, but something about them felt right. The alien was offering something John couldn't quite understand yet. Trust, maybe, or gratitude. But the villagers didn't hear it that way. Their murmurs grew louder, and John could hear the unease creeping into their voices. The threat of alien invaders, the fear of the unknown, was already setting in. For some, John's actions were nothing short of a betrayal. Then the silence was broken by a voice John hadn't expected, his wife. Emma stood at the edge of the barn, her face pale, her hands trembling slightly. She had heard the arguments, felt the weight of the decision. But John wasn't prepared for the quiet sadness in her eyes as she took a tentative step forward. I don't know what to believe anymore, she said, her voice fragile but steady. I don't know if I can stand with you on this, John. You've chosen to fight for something that might bring us all down. Her words stung more than he expected. He had hoped she would understand that they could face this together. But now he could see the doubt in her eyes. The alien was a choice, one that she wasn't sure she could make herself. John swallowed, the lump in his throat making it hard to speak. Emma, I couldn't turn away from him. I couldn't let him die out there, not when he needed help. She nodded slowly, stepping closer to him, her eyes never leaving the alien. I understand that, John, but this isn't just about helping one person anymore. This is bigger than us. This is about the village, about the people we know, about the future. John's mind raced, his heart aching at her words. She was right. This was bigger than one life. This was about their future, about whether the village would come together or tear itself apart over one decision. But the alien's plea echoed in his mind. The fire. The bond. Could he really turn his back on everything he had stood for just to protect what was familiar? The alien stepped forward, its heavy footsteps slow but deliberate. We are not enemies. We did not come here to fight, but we will fight to protect those who gave us shelter. If that means standing against your people, then we will stand. The last word lingered in the air. John could feel it deep in his bones, the weight of the alien's resolve. The warrior would fight if it came to that. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Then, to John's surprise, a few of the villagers stepped forward, their faces conflicted, but their voices clear. Old Tom, the village blacksmith, cleared his throat. I've worked this land my whole life, he said, his voice thick with years of labor. I know what it means to help someone when they've got nowhere to turn. Hell, we've all been there at one point or another. Maybe that's what we need right now, a little help from someone who's been through hell and made it out the other side. John's chest tightened as he looked at Tom, but the old man wasn't finished. I'm not saying we throw caution to the wind, Tom continued, but I don't think the alien's the real threat, not if we help them. It's the fear that's dangerous, fear of the unknown, and if we let that take over, we'll all lose something more than we ever imagined. John's breath caught in his throat. The blacksmith's words resonated deep inside him, sparking something, hope. The village was divided. Half of them still looked at the alien as a threat, a harbinger of destruction. The other half saw what John had seen, the possibility of something more. A chance to stand together despite everything that separated them. John turned back to the alien. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew that he couldn't turn back now. He had crossed the line. There was no going back to the way things had been. You've made your choice, the alien said again, its voice now soft but firm, an undercurrent of understanding in its words. We honor you as you have honored us, and we will stand with you no matter the cost. John stood tall, meeting the alien's gaze. The bond that had formed between them, however strange, felt unbreakable. He wasn't alone in this fight. They were together, bound by something more than just survival. This wasn't just about protecting his home. This was about something larger, something deeper. But just as John opened his mouth to speak, a sharp sound cut through the barn. A vehicle engine, the low hum of military-grade trucks. John's heart skipped a beat as the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. They were coming. Through the cracks in the barn, he could see the convoy of military trucks slowly rolling toward his property. The government had sent reinforcements. The low hum of the military trucks filled the air as John stood frozen at the barn window, staring out at the convoy that had just pulled up to the edge of his property. The sight of the soldiers, methodical and armed to the teeth, sent a chill down his spine. He didn't have much time. There was no place to run, no way to hide. The decision was in his hands now. He couldn't turn back. He glanced behind him at the alien warrior who stood unwavering, its eyes locked on John as if reading his every thought. The bond between them, whatever it was, felt solid, unshakable. The warrior had saved his life. Now John had to decide if he would stand with it, with the alien refugees who had given him their trust, or if he would turn his back and let the government take them away. The door to the barn creaked open slightly, and John's wife, Emma, stepped inside, her face pale. Her eyes, wide with fear and uncertainty, met John's, and she didn't need to say a word. He could see it in her expression. She knew what was coming. They all did. What are you going to do, John? Emma's voice trembled, but there was something else there, a quiet, unspoken question. She had been with him through everything, but this was different. She wasn't sure if she could stand by him in this. John exhaled slowly, his hands trembling as he gripped the edge of the window frame. I don't know, he said quietly, but there was a new clarity in his voice. I know what's right, and I know what's at stake. His eyes flicked to the alien, then back to Emma. But I can't let them take him, not after everything. Emma looked at the alien, her face filled with a mix of confusion, fear, and something else John couldn't quite read. The alien had become more than just a thing to her. It was alive. It had a story. And John had chosen to be part of that story. I just don't want to lose you, she whispered, stepping closer, her hands trembling as she reached for him. John took her hands in his, squeezing gently. "You won't. I'm not going anywhere." His voice was firm, though the uncertainty still gnawed at him. He could feel the weight of her gaze, the quiet plea for him to do something, anything, that would keep them safe. "We are ready," the alien spoke softly, its voice low but resolute. The warrior stepped forward, its hand resting gently on John's shoulder, its touch surprisingly warm. "We will fight, together, for the bond we share." John looked into the alien's pale eyes, seeing something in them that transcended the divide between species. It wasn't just a soldier's resolve. It was a promise, a shared purpose that bound them together. John's mind flashed to the past, to the lessons he had learned from his father. The values that had shaped him, honor, loyalty, standing up for those who couldn't defend themselves. His father's words echoed in his ears. "Son, when you make a choice, you don't get to back out of it. You don't get to ignore the consequences. You stand by it no matter what comes." John closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. When he opened them again, he knew what he had to do. The alien wasn't just a soldier from another world. It was a creature who had shown him something that, deep down, he already knew. The value of compassion, of standing together. That bond, that unspoken understanding, was more than he had ever hoped for. The voices outside grew louder, and John could hear the crunch of boots in the snow. The convoy was here. The soldiers had arrived. John turned to Emma, his hand still gripping hers. "I'm not running, and I won't let them tear us apart." His voice was stronger now, his decision made. "If it comes to a fight, we stand together." Emma looked into his eyes for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. Then slowly she nodded. "I'm with you, but please, John, don't let it go too far. We can't lose everything over this." John nodded. He didn't know how this would end, but one thing was certain. They had already lost so much. He wasn't going to lose more, not without a fight. The alien warrior stepped forward, its voice carrying across the barn. "The time for hiding is over. Let them see who we are." John's heart skipped a beat. The alien's words weren't just a declaration of war. They were a call to arms, a call to stand tall in the face of what was coming. The villagers, the soldiers, the authorities, they all needed to see what John had seen in that alien warrior. They needed to understand that this was no longer a battle for survival. It was a battle for dignity, for trust. John turned to face the barn door, his hand reaching for the latch. His mind raced. He could hear the soldiers just outside, their voices low, but their presence undeniable. John felt his heart pounding in his chest. His grip tightened on the door handle. Outside, the convoy had come to a stop. The soldiers were preparing, positioning themselves. The air was thick with tension. "John," Cole's voice rang out from outside. "You don't have to do this. It's not too late. Step aside and we won't have to make this worse." John's fingers brushed the door handle, but his resolve didn't waver. "I'm not stepping aside," he said, his voice loud enough for the soldiers to hear. He pulled the door open with a swift motion, and as the cold air rushed in, the first thing he saw was the convoy. 3 armored trucks, their engines rumbling like an approaching storm. Soldiers fanned out, rifles in hand, ready for anything. At the front, a figure in military garb stepped forward, Commander Parrish. Parrish's eyes locked with John. His lips curled into a tight, angry smile. "Turner," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. "You've made your choice, now you'll face the consequences." John's heart thudded in his chest, but he stepped forward, standing tall. He didn't flinch. "Maybe," John said, his voice steady, "but I'm not backing down." The alien warrior stood beside him, its posture straight and proud. Behind them, Emma and the villagers watched in silence, uncertain but ready. John looked at the 5 cloaked figures behind the alien warrior, his new family. They were here. They had made their stand, and John knew in that moment that no matter what happened next, they would stand together. His choices had led him here, and now there was no turning back. The tension in the air was palpable. John stood at the threshold of the barn, his heart pounding as he faced Commander Parrish and the convoy of soldiers. The cold wind bit at his skin, but it wasn't the chill of the storm that made his hands tremble. It was the weight of the decision he had made, the choice that had already begun to shape the future of his life, his family, and the village he had called home for so long. The alien warrior, its blue skin scarred and battered from the crash, stood beside him, tall and unyielding. Behind them, the 5 alien women, still cloaked in their dark hoods, moved with silent precision, their presence a quiet but unmistakable reminder of the bond they had forged. Parrish stepped forward, his boots crunching through the snow, his expression hard and unyielding. "John Turner," he called, his voice carrying through the cold air. You've made your choice, and now you will answer for it. John's chest tightened. This was it, the moment where everything would either fall apart or come together. The alien warriors, the villagers, even Emma, stood in the background, each of them waiting for John to make the next move. John's voice was calm but firm. I'm not backing down, Parrish, not now, not ever. The military commander's lips twisted into a sneer. You're harboring dangerous aliens. You've broken every law this country has. You've chosen their side over your own people, and now you want me to just walk away. I never asked you to walk away, John said, taking a step forward. I'm asking you to listen. The alien you want to destroy is the same one I saved, the one I've helped, the one who saved me. Parrish's gaze flicked briefly to the alien warrior before returning to John. You don't know what you're dealing with, Turner. These creatures don't belong here. You've jeopardized everything, your family, your neighbors, this entire village. John's jaw tightened. He knew what was at stake, but he also knew something that Parrish didn't. The alien warriors weren't invaders. They were survivors. They were refugees running from a war that had torn apart their world. And they hadn't come here to conquer. They had come for peace. A voice came from behind John, soft but steady, and it made his heart skip. Emma stepped forward, standing beside him, her face pale but resolute. We can't live in fear anymore, Parrish, she said, her voice trembling but strong. We've lived with fear of the unknown for too long. We've let that fear dictate our actions, and look where it's gotten us. Parrish didn't flinch, but John saw a flicker of doubt in his eyes. You're choosing to stand with them, then? John's heart ached as he glanced at Emma, then back at the alien warrior who stood silent but strong beside him. I'm choosing what's right, what's just. I don't know what the future holds, but I know this much. These aliens, they didn't ask for any of this. They didn't choose to crash on our planet. They didn't choose to be hunted. John's voice grew stronger. But I chose to help them, and I will stand by that choice. There was a long, tense silence. The wind howled, but it felt like time had stopped. The soldiers shifted nervously, unsure of what to do next. Some of the villagers, watching from the barn, began to stir. John could feel their eyes on him, waiting for his lead. Suddenly, the alien warrior stepped forward, its gaze shifting to the 5 cloaked figures behind it. We are not your enemies, it said, its voice clear and unshaken. We are your kin. You gave us shelter, warmth. You gave us life when you could have turned us away. Now we will honor that bond, no matter what comes. The alien warrior turned to face John, its eyes glowing with something John could only describe as pride. Your fire is ours. We will fight for you as you have fought for us. John nodded slowly, the weight of the alien's words sinking deep into his chest. He didn't know if he could ever repay them for what they had done, but he knew this was the only way forward. This was about more than just survival. This was about standing together, about unity and understanding in the face of fear and hatred. Parrish's eyes hardened, and he took a step back as if weighing his options. You're making a huge mistake, Turner, a mistake you'll regret for the rest of your life. John didn't back down. He stood tall, his heart steady. Maybe, but I won't regret standing for what's right. For a moment, the 2 men stood locked in a silent standoff. The wind picked up again, the cold biting at John's skin, but his resolve was unshaken. His decision had been made. And then something unexpected happened. One by one, the villagers began to step forward, their eyes on John and the alien warriors. Old Tom, the blacksmith, moved first, his heavy boots crunching in the snow. I've known John my whole life, he said, his voice carrying. And if he says these creatures are no threat, then I believe him. Cole, still standing in the background, hesitated, but then his shoulders slumped. Hell, I don't know what's right anymore, but if John's standing with them, then maybe I should stand with him. It wasn't much, but it was enough. One by one, the villagers began to show their support for John. Some still looked uncertain, but others, the ones who had worked beside him for years, nodded in agreement. It wasn't just about the alien warrior anymore. It was about the man who had always stood by them, the man who had fought for them when no one else would. Parrish's face twisted with frustration. You think this is over? You think your little village is going to change anything? I'll be back. You won't get away with this. John stepped forward, his heart pounding, but his voice steady. You can come back all you want, Parrish, but the fire won't die, not now, not ever. The soldiers, still hesitant, looked to their commander, but John could see the uncertainty creeping into their eyes. They weren't sure what to make of this. They hadn't expected John to stand his ground. They hadn't expected the village to rally around him. With a final, seething look, Commander Parrish turned on his heel and signaled his men. "Get in the trucks. We'll report back to the higher-ups." John's pulse was still racing as he watched the convoy retreat, the sound of the trucks slowly fading into the distance. The weight of the moment was still settling over him, but in that moment he realized something. The village had chosen. They had chosen unity even in the face of fear. They had chosen to trust. And the fire, his fire, would burn brighter because of it. Conclusion: as the convoy disappeared into the distance, John stood tall, surrounded by the alien warriors and the villagers who had chosen to stand with him. Emma stepped up beside him, her hand in his. She didn't say anything, but the look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. "Our fire is shared," the alien warrior said softly, its voice like a promise. John nodded, feeling the weight of the words settle in his chest. "We'll make them see," John said quietly, more to himself than anyone else. "We'll make them understand." And as the sun began to set, casting long shadows over the fields, John knew that the fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. But together they would stand, and together they would endure.